Thank you, Natasha. I'll apologise in advance. I am working from home today and the dog might join us. So apologies if he starts woofing. I'm just going to try and help put into context some of the things that we might be able to do to implement the visions that Natasha has laid out here. And I'm going to make it as very short and succinct as possible. But I'd like to just pick up, first of all, on a couple of things that Alex said. And actually, I love that phrase that research is creativity as well as systematic. And for people who, like myself, who are very much scientists at heart and like all that proof and evidence and everything very logical, the creative part of my job is thinking about how can I make this better? What would work better here? What can we involve? So I think research and the creativity that goes with research is actually well-being for scientists. And I think that's what makes us feel better. So research can also be added to part of the well-being strategy of the trust at the moment. And I think a lot of people are seeing research as something to take them out of the humdrum of and the stresses of the normal activities. And I agree wholeheartedly with all the aspirational goals. Can we go on to the first slide? And oh yes, so how are we going to implement this vision? And I think to a certain extent, it's the chicken and the egg. What are we going to do first? And I think you have to do both at the same time. There has to be a level of change and investment in order for the research to grow. But obviously the research can't grow without the investment. So the two things come together, but the research will bring it all in. And I think we're beginning to put the infrastructure in place to get everything going on. Next slide. So what are the things that help us deliver research in Hampshire hospitals? Well, the first thing is there's quite a lot of regulation out there that requires professionals to be involved in research. And for example, the GMC is very, very clear that doctors need to facilitate research in clinical research in some shape or form. And that may just mean supporting colleagues in the department that are doing research, identifying patients that might be able to enter trials. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it yourself, but it does mean that everybody has to be involved, everybody has to be aware, and everybody has to make sure that they are broadly supportive of what people are doing. The CQC have put research as part of the important questions they ask when they come around and inspect us, and they expect people, the OSMs, the clinical directors, all the divisional directors, to know what research is going on in their department. And that's something that hasn't really been up there in the past. And so I think one of our roles is to make sure that all of these leaders throughout the trust are aware of what's going on and make sure that they support it. And I see us as providing that information back to the divisions. Obviously, we rely quite a lot on the local research network, and the direction of travel with the research network at the moment is to develop a Wessex-wide unit rather than all the individual hospitals within the region. And so we see ourselves as part of that, but perhaps we can add our own unique selling points to enhance what's delivered across the region. And I've got some ideas which I'm not going to discuss in public at the moment because I don't want them stolen. We obviously are developing our infrastructure so that people who come to us say, I've got an idea or I want to get involved in a study, they can be helped through that process. And Tori's going to show you all the documents that she's been working on, and they are really very clear, very, very helpful of how to do research, how to get involved in research. It looks a lot, but actually it's really simple and very easy to understand. And I have to again say, what's really helping is that the enormous amount of support we're getting from the leadership of the trust, Alex and Lara in particular, but also Shirlene has been really helpful for us. And it's about getting all these people to get their enthusiasm and their vision trickle downwards towards those a bit closer to the shop floor. But it is fantastic to have that huge amount of support behind us. One of the things we're looking at the moment is looking, for example, as an example, is we're going to look at how doctors' jobs are allocated. We've got new software, and we want to look at where the research fits in within the departments and try and match the hours spent on research with the amount of research activity that's happening. And I suspect there's going to be not very many hours for quite a lot of activity. And that's partly embedded in the job descriptions. And I certainly know that for a lot of, and certainly more senior nurses, research is actually in there in the standard job descriptions. And again, it's about facilitating it, but I think we need to bring that forward a little bit more. The other thing we've been looking, again, Roxana's trying to pick all these things out, is there's lots of grants out there. So there was recently a bid looking at non-medical staff looking to fund them to take time out to do some research. That recently there's another one come round from the Royal Colleges looking to support people to take small sabbaticals to do the research. And obviously we've actually got, we've only got 2 at the moment, or 2.5, of junior doctors who are being sponsored to do half-time research, and we're hoping that they will be trained up to be the investigators of the future, and that's the idea. But we hope to build on that a little bit more. And obviously with our university links, that is going to be helpful because we'll have more people that can help in the background, bring in more students that can help facilitate the research, but also we may be able to push forward for a little bit more clinical academic roles with that university link. Next page, please. So some of the things that are currently restraining us, I think I've sort of summed these up as, time. I mean, nobody in the, but practically nobody in Hampshire hospitals has any allocated and dedicated additional time to do research. They might have a little bit of SPA time, but that is not going to help you apply for grants. It's not going to help you get big research projects up and running, get involved in the national stuff, and people are doing all that in their spare time. So actually we really need to think about how we dedicate time and how we fund that. So I think that departments will need to look at how we support the research with paid time in some shape or form. And again, I think we may be able to look at business plans to do that with the help of Roxana and some of the other initiatives that she's got her eye on. Space is an issue. We all know that. It's space for staff to actually sit at a desk, because even if they're on the ward most of the time, they do need to come and sit down and at some point and write up their notes, electronically or otherwise. So it's actually finding space. We were short of space before social distancing kicked in. I mean, we were hot desking and people having to sit in the cars or sit in the canteen and the Arc and what have you to do work, and that's obviously been made a lot worse by the social distancing that we have to put in place at the moment. We also don't have space to see patients. So if you want to see, have extra visits for patients for a clinical trial, you need time to consent them. Where are you going to see them? We're really short of outpatient space. So space for that clinical part of the job is really crucial, and we really don't have enough of that. And lab space is a big project for us, and something that we really do want to push through. And this will incorporate into the plans for the new hospital that we're building. When it comes to money, I think that people don't understand just how much research benefits the NHS as a whole. And sometimes the way we silo the finances really doesn't help. So, for example, we might get involved in a chemotherapy trial. It might be absolutely fantastic. We get free drugs. But Hampshire Hospital doesn't pay for the drugs. It's the GPs that pay for the drugs. So the GPs are benefiting and they're saving. It's not our saving directly. It might be costing us more because they're taking longer in the chemotherapy room and we have to have more chemotherapy nurses. So it's about undoing those silos, but looking at the benefits as a whole. And it's really, really difficult to measure. People have tried it, but for the NHS as a whole, it is very beneficial. And we need to get that message out to everyone. There is a huge potential for income generation, particularly where we have innovation and intellectual property, but all of that will start with somebody's idea, proof of principle studies, and initial studies to show that it works, and then we've got that intellectual property we can run with. We have to be able to support that, we have to be able to reinvest that for the next round. And in order to do all of that, there needs to be really good budgetary responsibility. And I think we need to be really visible about how we do that. And we haven't been able to do that in the past. And very much we are looking at how we publish all of that going forward, share it with the people who are interested. Alex did talk about staff and having enough people to do the research. And I think this really does the rather crude phrase bums on seats. There need to be more people. There's no locums in research, and actually one of the things we found during the pandemic is if somebody was off sick, somebody was isolating, we can't ask somebody else to come in, and we needed to keep going with this absolutely crucial work for the COVID pandemic studies. And so bums on seats is something I'd really like to see us developing some solutions for. For example, by bringing seconding nurses into research, training them up so that they know how to do these things, then letting them go back to the ward where hopefully they've got their own ideas, they can develop within the ward, but we can also call on them to do extra sessions if we need to. And I think that will also help with recruitment and retention. Alex talked about people who might be burnt out with the shift working, with frontline work, and actually to be able to bring them into research, even if it's only for a short period of time, to do something different, to develop their skills. I think that's all really interesting. And the same goes for the lab staff in particular. I think research is very much part of recruitment and retention for lab staff. And there was a couple of other things just to talk about the patients themselves. There's a lot of patients need to know that research is available, or they need to know and encourage their clinicians to take part in research. And there's a lot of mileage in patient power. And the NIHR have got a project called Be Part of Research. So patients can tap in online, find out which studies are going on locally, so they can either look at what's going on in their local area, or they can look by disease. So they might say, okay, I've got this particular disease, and there's this interesting research project that's taking place in the nearby hospital. I want to be part of that, and they can volunteer to be part of that. So that's part of it. It's also the research ambassador, the patient volunteer roles, and increasing the amount of patient and partner involvement. And I think I will stop talking at that point, because I think we've covered most things. That should be the last slide. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Siobhan. I've got a question for you that leads on and builds from what you were just saying. We had an amazing response and engagement from HHFT staff during COVID, both in supporting and participating in research. How do we harvest it? How do we capitalise on it now and not lose that momentum? What do you think?
Yes, I totally agree. I think this is the first step in showcasing what's been going on and what we've done. And I think we also need to make sure that our structures are in place that will allow people to take part. And I think one of the things is I think we've really got to go and engage our nursing workforce, and Cindy will be talking about strategies to do this. Doctors are generally trained, and research is already part of the way our brains work and the way our training takes us. But I think for nurses, I think we need a little bit more of a push, and there's a huge amount of goodwill there that we need to capitalise on that. I think with doctors, you're pushing against an open door to a certain extent, as long as you can give them time. But for nurses, I think we need to give them, we need to empower them. And the same goes for some of the other AHPs. but we have seen a lot of enthusiasm. We've had the physio students in doing some a research secondment. We've got psychology in the trust with looking at some of the posters. So I think there's a lot of things out there that we can capitalise on, and I think we've really got to work with that. But it's giving people the time and the confidence to be involved is going to be the key.
Yes, and I did have a backup question to that, but you actually answered it in your presentation, talking about the timing and the costing and finding the money beyond SPA time.
Yes, yeah.
So just before we hand over to Cindy, I think we had a question that also came in from the chat. Liz, if you're listening, I think you had a question for Siobhan.
Hi, Siobhan. It was just really, is there anything, obviously being clinical director of research, we've seen a lot of changes during COVID and how we're having to deliver research. What do you think we've learned from those first and those second waves about delivering that research, particularly urgent public health, but then alongside some of our other research?
I think the main thing, I think the two real things that have come out of it, one is that the general enthusiasm for research and people actually seeing this fantastic example of how research works. And I think things like Siren, things like Recovery have been amazing. I mean, Recovery was a really well designed trial, and it allowed us to adapt as things moved in a situation that none of us have ever encountered before. So I think that was a really good example of how important things are. And when you have all this disinformation about, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that, and everybody should be on hydrochloroquine and all the stuff, and Trump's taking this and sticking bleach up his nose, then it's really important to have that research and have that evidence in there. And I think people have seen that. So I think that's really important. I think the message is getting through. The other thing that I think we've learned is that we don't have enough resilience in our team, and we need to be able to pull more people into the team, and we need to be able to look a little bit more laterally about how we provide our service, so to make the most of our senior and experienced research team, and to be able to adapt. But it's really difficult to mentor new people and inexperienced people in a job in the middle of a pandemic when you're already short of staff and you're already meant to be in 4 places at once. So I think the resilience of the team is something that we really need to focus on. Hopefully there won't be another pandemic on this scale, but it's about being able to have that resilience in the team, I think.
Absolutely. I think sort of echoing from that, some really great sort of points, but it was just also really thanking those staff that we had redeployed to us within the first wave, because actually I think they really enjoyed that experience, and we did manage to sort of teach them, and they got something from that and we got something back. So, you know, there may be models that can be used creatively, to use your words, in the future. So and someone's just put in the chat, it'd be great if we could have some regular training for taking part in research apart from just the GCP. So maybe there are things to think about. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Siobhan, and thank you very much, Natasha. Siobhan, we're very disappointed that we didn't meet your dog,